Hello kitties, today we once again travel back in time to the 1st century BC for Caesar's Civil War Part 2. Caesar's legates, total loss in Africa, wasn't Caesar's only problem. He had his 9th Legion who had suffered heavy losses at Ilerda and who haven't received pay, deciding to mutiny. Caesar rushes to keep the mutiny from spreading to his other legions. Caesar gives the 9th an emotional speech, pointing out that his actions were usually quick and decisive, and he was not to blame for prolonging the war. He then hit them where it hurt in the psyche, where he said he had brought them to fame and fortune, and they repay him with mutiny. The only punishment suitable was decimation. The 9th began to beg Caesar to reconsider, and in true Caesarian form, he only punished 12 of the instigators, bringing the 9th back under control. Also, elections in Rome were being held, but no consuls were there to preside over the election. So Caesar was nominated dictator, presiding over the elections. So Caesar was then made consul, so he resigned as dictator. Now Caesar made his bid for Pompeii in Greece. Upon landing in Greece, Caesar quickly took Oricum and Apollonia. Caesar then marched toward Dyrrhachium, a major supply hub for the Pompeian faction. Pompey was warned of Caesar's marching on Dyrrhachium and forced marched his men in an effort to beat Caesar there. Although the forced march took its toll on his men, his newer men, forcing some auxiliaries to desert, Pompey beat Caesar to Dyrrhachium and camped outside of the town, forcing Caesar to stop, taking a defensive position on the southern bank of the river Aspis. Pompey knew Caesar had legitimacy as consul, and he had to defeat Caesar in the field, but Pompey remained indecisive, although he had 60,000 to Caesar's 30,000, a 2-to-1 advantage in men. Pompey didn't have any faith in his newly formed legions against Caesar's veteran legions, so a standoff ensued. During this time, Caesar, harassed by Bibulus' naval parties who frequently had to come ashore for supplies. It got so bad that Bibulus parlayed with Caesar, but to no avail. Then in January of 48 BC, Antony was able to sail 3 veteran legions and 1 newly found legion across the Adriatic to Greece. And this was partly due to Bibulus had died, leaving the navy of Pompey leaderless. Though Antony had been forced to land at Nymphaeum, with Caesar and Pompey both rushing to meet Antony, Caesar wanting to link up with Antony, and Pompey wanting to stop Caesar from linking with Antony. Pompey arrived first and made an effort to ambush Antony as he tried to link up with Caesar, but some locals let Antony know of Pompey's plan, so Antony made camp. It was then Pompey came to the conclusion that his position was tenable at best, soon to be caught between Caesar's army and Antony's legions. So Pompey fell back to Asparagum. Caesar linked up with Antony and immediately became the aggressor, sending Calvinius to cut off Scipio in Macedonia. Then he sent Cassius Longinus to Thessaly and Sabinus to acquire grain in Aetolia. Caesar's navy was destroyed, effectively stranding him in Greece. So he decided to push an engagement with Pompey. First at Asparagum, but Pompey wouldn't bite. So Caesar attacked Dyrrhachium in hopes to force Pompey's hand, though Caesar didn't reveal his target right away, taking Pompey some time to realize where Caesar was heading, immediately giving chase, forcing Caesar to march at night. And Caesar reached Dyrrhachium first, getting camp on high ground outside the city. Pompey did the same south of Caesar's position. Pompey had the advantage in troop numbers with 53,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry to Caesar's 35,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry. Pompey also had a better supply line, but Caesar had the more battle-hardened troops. Using one of his favorite tactics, Caesar encompassed Pompey forces by fortifying the hills around Pompey's position in an effort of circumvallation to cut off Pompey's supply chain. Pompey countered by setting up his own defenses coordinating his men to fortify as many hills so they could force Caesar to keep expanding, stretching his line to its max. Caesar had completed his defenses by June and had pinned Pompey to the sea, forcing Pompey to be supplied by sea. Pompey, though skilled in his own right, did all he could to harass Caesar, even sending his cavalry out of camp so they could openly forage or even attack Caesar's camp from the rear. In early July, Caesar was told some Dyrrhachium citizens wanted to defeat, and Caesar, upon trying to meet with them, was ambushed by Pompey's cavalry, and Pompey attacked simultaneously in 3 different assaults on Caesar's wall. Caesar's men were pushed to the brink, but they held on, eventually forcing Pompey's troops to retreat. Caesar probably escaped a trap set up to nab him, and Pompey was showing how he was a cunning enemy. And Caesar's legions proved their mettle time and time again, though. Caesar arrayed his legions in battle formation, forcing Pompey to sally out and form divisions as a show of force, but would not engage Caesar. With his legates having success in Greece, Caesar now had a strong logistic supply train and again offered peace terms to Scipio, but they refused to treat with Caesar. Caesar's forces were able to cut off Pompey's cavalry, cutting off their supply line and their ability to forage, forcing them back into Pompey's camp. It was then Pompey received some fortunate luck when 2 men defected from Caesar's camp and gave Pompey a detailed description of Caesar's defenses and the weak points in his walls. Pompey made plans to attack the wall with 60 cohorts or 30,000 men, while his light infantry would attack from outside the wall, being sailed around and into position. The attack almost worked, routing the men defending until Antony and 6,000 men reinforced the weak point, soon to be followed by Caesar himself with another 6,500 men. Then in a battle over an encampment, Caesar committed his entire army to the battle, where they were broken and forced to retreat. But Pompey didn't pursue, thinking Caesar was laying a trap for him, and missed his best opportunity to destroy Caesar's army outright. Pompey was held imperator, but refused the bay leaves. Caesar retreated back to Apollonia. Pompey prematurely sent word to his client kings he had won the war. Caesar had been beaten, not destroyed, and Caesar falling back to Apollonia. He also told his men, just as Elysia followed the misfortunes of Gergovia, so too would this defeat at Dyrrhachium be followed by a great victory. Everything now hinged on Caesar being able to link up with Domitius and his 2 Gallic legions to bolster his ranks. So both Caesar and Pompey set out to reach. Domitius was at a loss, but in a stroke of luck, some Gauls who had defected to Pompey had a change of heart and defected back to Caesar, or actually to Domitius, and gave Domitius plans of Pompey's location and plans, which allowed Domitius to plan his route to merge with Caesar, and he did, uniting Caesar's whole army minus the 27th Legion. Pompey still had the upper hand, but planned on avoiding confrontation with Caesar, using the famed Fabian strategy in hopes of wearing out Caesar's army. But Pompey's generals were starting to accuse him of cowardice. Pompey knew he would have to face Caesar sooner or later, so his army would not fracture. Caesar, meanwhile, stormed the town of Gompi, then marched to Metropolis, which surrendered at Caesar's arrival upon hearing of Gompi's fate. Pompey decided to meet Caesar at Pharsalus, willing to give battle, setting up camp on high ground. His men and generals had high hopes of victory. Confidence was very high in Pompey's camp. Pompey still held the numerical advantage, 47,000 men, 7,000 cavalry, to Caesar's 21,000 men, 700 cavalry. Caesar was also confident in his army, which was a battle-hardened machine and very disciplined. But the majority of Pompey's army had first seen battle at Dyrrhachium. Every day, Caesar forced battle divisions in front of Pompey, but Pompey wouldn't answer by giving battle. Caesar, tiring of the same old thing every day, had prepared to strike camp, keeping his army on the move because Pompey wouldn't give battle. But on the last second, Caesar was preparing to leave. Pompey moved his army off the hill into battle formations. Caesar, not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth, seized upon the opportunity and arrayed his army in battle formations to meet Pompey on the field. Pompey took the classic Roman triplex axes, but with more depth of 10 men for defensive posture. Lucius Lentulus commanded 2 legions on his left wing. Scipio and the Syrian legions held the center, while the right wing was held by a combo of two legions, having the river on their side to protect their right flank. Pompey found his less experienced legions and auxiliaries and two backups lines behind the first. Labienus commanded 7,000 cavalry on Pompey's extreme left, while 2,000 more cavalry were held as backup under Afrianus, who decided to face Caesar again, breaking his promise in Spain. Caesar also formed the Tropics Axis formation with his favorite legion, the 10th on his right, opposite Pompey. The 8th and 9th legions were on Caesar's left flank under Antony's command. The center under Domitius was the 11th and 12th legions. Caesar had 3 reinforcement lines behind his main line. Caesar opened up the battle, charging Pompey's line, who did not countercharge, and in a brilliant display, Caesar's line halted and reformed mid-charge. Pompey sent his cavalry to flank and attack Caesar, but Caesar had his 4th line face the opposing cavalry, and Labienus, not seeing this, led his cavalry into a rout by Caesar's veteran 4th line. Now Pompey was being flanked by the 10th and 4th legions of Caesar. Then Caesar committed all his reserves, his many fresh troops, into the foray. Pompey's lines began to break. Pompey himself almost captured, forcing him to flee the battlefield. His men followed suit. Caesar then stormed the camp in an overwhelming victory, easily defeating the thousands of men there. Pompey and most of his top generals escaped, but Caesar had won an outstanding victory. Caesar showed leniency with Pompey's troops. In the meantime, Pompey tried to raise another army, but failed due to the lack of backers, and his plan to sail to Syria was changed when Pompey, eventually arriving in Egypt, met by a small rowing boat offshore. The lack of pomp had worried Pompey's wife, though Pompey reassured her. Once reaching shore, Pompey stepped out the boat and quoted Sophocles to his wife: "He who enters a tyrant's door becomes his slave, even if he leaves a free man." It was then that Septimius, Achilles, and Savius struck, stabbing Pompey and then beheading him, throwing his body back into the sea. And so passed Pompey the Great, 3-time consul of Rome, conqueror of the East, one of Rome's most prolific generals, died being killed unhonorably by being tricked and beheaded. When Caesar finally reached Egypt in pursuit of Pompey, he was presented with Pompey's head. Caesar turned away, clearly disgusted by the gift. Then they presented to Caesar the seal of Pompey, which made Caesar begin to weep. See, Caesar and Pompey had been related by marriage, political colleagues, even ruled Rome together. Caesar respected Pompey, but Pompey's death did mark the turning point in the civil war. Caesar clearly with the upper hand, and the Optimates scattered throughout the Roman Empire, mostly in Africa. A few more battles had to be won, but Caesar finished the civil war, eventually bringing the Republic to its last days. Rome was soon to be an empire. And Caesar would die March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March, after becoming dictator. And I'm Big Duke 6. Hit subscribe, hit the noti bell, like, hell, even comment. I would appreciate it, and so would the channel. And thank you to everyone who has listened, my friends and family. And remember, people, si vis pacem parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war.